Welcome, a very warm welcome to you, our virtual audience and our delightful speakers to the first day of the MedGold Final Showcase event. My name is Katrina Stickle. I'm a moderator and a broadcaster, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of navigating all of us from my home office in Brussels through the plenary sessions of this two-day event that features a raft of really excellent speakers drawn from across the globe and, of course, from across the stakeholder ecosystem. Now, you, our audience, also represents a variety of different stakeholder groups, so you have a diverse knowledge and interests in the topics. So we have asked our speakers to pitch their presentations and their contributions to meet a variety of needs through some really compelling stories and narratives. Now, with that in mind, on day one, we'll focus on success stories from the MedGold project. So we're going to hear from the scientific and the industrial partners about their experiences in co-developing climate services. And that's a very important word, which we're going to hear a lot today. And on day two, we'll focus on the contribution of MedGold to society, on how it promotes and creates resilience, how it contributes also to sustainable development goals. And we'll also look at how it fits alongside other initiatives, that's critical, and its future prospects and legacy. But absolutely back to the now. Now, before we dive into this opening session, I just want you to listen carefully, please. I know it's early, but I'm going to talk you through some housekeeping elements that enable you to make the best of this brilliant swap card platform. Now, first of all, please do visit the virtual booths. There's a point in using this platform. You can discover the MedGold partners, you can see their services, you can even have the possibility of chatting with them. So you can interact at those booths with the hosts through the chat, or you can actually book video calls. It's all really, really intuitive. So just have a little feel and a little browse around. You can visit the digital gallery. You can find all sorts of things there related to MedGold, papers, brochures, infographics, videos. So do have a look. You can also initiate a discussion via the live features in the replicability corner. I had to practice saying that many times. That's an open space where you can learn more about the vision from sectors beyond the traditional Mediterranean grape, olive and Durham wheat agri-food systems. Critically, and that's also the point of this platform, you can network with other participants and speakers via connections and meeting requests. So do make the effort to do that. Importantly, how else can you make your voice heard and exchange thoughts with our expert guests? Well, during the event, you can use live features to chat directly with speakers. Now, not the ones who are in a session with me at the time, but if you want to catch them afterwards, when they'll be on swap card with you, you can ask them questions. Now, some of those will be answered by the MedGold team live, if they're particularly technical ones, and others, when I'm in a session with particular speakers, will be curated by the MedGold team and sent to me to pose to those speakers. So here is my bossy golden rule. You've got to keep them short, please. Literally Morse code length, or we simply cannot take them. Don't forget to say who you are and the name of your organisation. Finally, you don't need to take pics of the screen. Speaker presentations will be uploaded onto swap card. Bios are available, so I'm not going to do any long intros. The event will be recorded and uploaded as an on-demand content, and that will be available until the 15th of April. Critically, because it is a beautifully intricate platform, if you have any issue, all you need to do is access the help desk chat. That's available on the homepage. And I'm telling you now, because you need to think about this, we're going to ask you to also fill in a simple questionnaire about your experiences of the event on days 1 and 2, because it really does help the organisers have a good idea of what you need when you are watching a virtual event. And finally, as an extension of that, there is a tab called Share Your Idea, and that aims to create a forum of discussion for you to air your experiences and your opinions. So do go there. It's a lot. Just give you a breather. I guess the main thing is take your time, use that platform, have a look around. That's it. It's more important now that you hear from our speakers. So let's get stuck into our opening session. Now, this, in a very dynamic way, will present the first steps in this co-production approach followed in MedGold. So the focus really is on building a common language. And I heard this a lot when I was speaking to the speakers before the event. It's going to cover the aspects of understanding user needs and explore why, critically, building trust between science and users is such an important aspect of the co-production process. So, who do we have things to kick off here? Which speakers do we have? Let's have a look. Hopefully we can see a slide. I can't see the slide yet. There it is. Okay, I'm actually going to put, you can only hear me and not see me, so I'm going to put my glasses on. But here, this gives you an idea of who we have in this slide and, well, critically, the discussions that we will be having. So it is an opening session in several parts, and that is the best way to chunk up the information for you, and I will be navigating us through that. And don't forget, of course, you can actually look at the sessions and how they're broken down online on the Swapcard platform. So without further ado, can you please join me, members of the MedGold coordination team? Please come to the screen, Alessandro Dell'Aquila, who is Senior Researcher at INEA, the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development. We also have the lovely Matteo De Felice, European Commission Joint Research Centre. We have Luigi Ponti, also from INEA, and Sandro Calmanti. So there you go, look at me. I am the big-headed female surrounded by you. I feel actually very, very important. Now, I've taken up enough of your time. You've got this beautifully slick presentation to take people dynamically through this. I'm very happy to prompt you one by one so that it's all nice and smoothly done. So we're going to start with Alessandro. You have to break the ice for this whole event. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you for your kind introduction. I am Alessandro Dell'Aquila. I'm a dermatologist from INEA, Italy, and I'm a part of the coordination team of MedGold. Here, I would like to tell you shortly where MedGold came from. MedGold is a 4-year research innovation project that aims to demonstrate the proof of concept for climate service in agriculture by co-developing case studies for 3 of the most relevant food systems in the Mediterranean region: grape and wine, olive and olive oil, drum wheat and pasta. These prototypes have been co-produced and tested with major industrial partners of the global food system, and we'll talk with them later this morning. As climate service means different things for different people, the idea of co-production plays a key role to implement an effective service. A bit of history. We started the first discussion about this proposal around late 2015, more or less, but we didn't start from scratch. MedGold sinks its roots in the first European project on climate service, like ClimRun, Eclise, and Euporias, more than 10 years ago. Our proposal picked the ideas up from all these initiatives. For instance, MedGold took from ClimRun the idea of a standardized protocol for developing climate service. ClimRun itself and Eclise as well were focused on the engagement of stakeholders for turning climate data into sectoral information, but with a limited attention for decision-making process. On the other hand, Euporias was more focused on the assessment of sector-specific vulnerabilities and on the development of prototype with a non-systemic involvement of problem holder, and it was a suboptimal situation. Building on those past experience, in MedGold, the founding idea was to create a new paradigm of climate-informed decision-making process with an approach based on the co-production and systemic engagement of users. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm waiting to see myself next to you. Wow, that was beautifully concise. You really stuck to your 2 minutes. I have so many questions. I'm not allowed to ask them, but you're based in Rome, as I believe. Is it? Yeah, you're based in Rome. So when I'm next there, which quite frankly won't be hard for me to come, I will ask you a lot of questions. But what I do pick up very interestingly, and I think very important as a basis for all the conversation at this event, you said climate services means different things for different people, and you've got to get that sorted at the outset. So let's hear more, please. Can I invite to the screen Matteo De Felice? If you could please join me. There you are.
Yes.
It is your moment in the spotlight. Welcome. Now, I didn't pronounce your second name correctly, did I?
No, well, not bad. I mean, don't worry.
Hey, that's the moderator. Doesn't make me feel better. Okay, so please pick up the story. I heard there about, importantly to this project, the assessment of sector-specific vulnerabilities. We were talking about that. Please carry on our story. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks. Thanks, Katrina. Okay, my name is Matteo De Felice. I'm currently at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, but I was part of the team of 4 people who wrote, designed, and crafted the MEDCOL project. We recently realized that we started drafting MEDGOL at the same time at the beginning of the Copernicus Climate Change Service CDS development, because the CDS, so the Copernicus Data Store, the first alpha version was available at the beginning of 2017. So it was at that time. And I would say that at that moment, the climate data started to lose the centrality to become an enabler of information and knowledge. And I think that MEDGOL, this project, perfectly illustrates this paradigm shift. This shift, in my opinion, has been driven by technology, for sure. I mean, availability of cheap storage, computational resources, but mainly the main driver was the need of the society to deal with the climate change and climate variability in many sectors, including agriculture. Mm-hmm. So my main comment is that, in other words, the focus, and this is MEDCOL is perfect in synthesizing this shift, the focus shifted from producing climate data to create value with them. And I think we can see the results of MEDCOL that perfectly illustrates this phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Super beautifully concise and really interesting to hear. Absolutely, there is that shift. It's all about creating value. And I'm sure we will talk about that and the quality of data and how you package it in very specific ways in order to help decision making and policy making, but also those sectors themselves. So thank you so much for that. I'm now going to invite Luigi Ponti to, there you are also from ENEA. You are going to continue this story and give us some more insights into this project. So the floor is yours, Luigi. Thank you.
Thanks, Katerina. Good morning, everybody. My name is Luigi. I am an agricultural engineer. I was born in Sardinia. I grew up there, right in the middle of the Mediterranean basin. So this is a particularly exciting moment because my job basically today is to tell you why agriculture, why the Mediterranean basin was the focus of our project on climate services. So agriculture, the reason it's because it's the economic sector that is most affected by climate. Agriculture is heavily influenced by weather and limited by climate. But the Mediterranean basin, this region is particularly affected by climate change. It's a hotspot. Mm-hmm. It means it will be affected by climate change more than the rest.
At that critical moment, for me, Luigi has gone, but I don't know if that's true of everybody else. Hang on. Let's just give him a moment, see if he can come back. I was actually going to tell you something very, very interesting about Luigi. Luigi is an insect specialist, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you that of all the different speakers I've come across in my time, for some reason that sort of tickled me the most. I really like that. Now, I don't know if any of the other gentlemen can fill in for Luigi in that story, so we don't lose time, because I don't want to sort of invite Sandro forward without hearing the piece of the puzzle that we're missing. What do you think? I'm looking at Alessandro and Matteo. Let's just see if there is, oh, there's two of me, but I can't give you the rest of this story. I'm still struggling a little bit. I see Matteo. Now, Matteo, give me a sec. There you are. Matteo, are you able to take things forward? He was talking about the hotspot and, of course, the fact that agriculture is absolutely, and I don't think that's a huge surprise to anybody, vulnerable to climate change.
Yes, yes, it's definitely hard to to replace Luigi's insights, but yes, I think you wanted to say that olive, grapes, and wine are, of course, a very important part of the Mediterranean biocultural diversity. We can see this every day in Mediterranean countries, of course.
Yeah,
and we can see many cases that the systems has been disrupted, threatened, or in any case affected by climate change in the entire Mediterranean region. So, and then I think the idea behind MedGold is to turn all the wealth of climate information, to transform it into added value, to deal with these important challenges posed by climate change. And of course, MedGold is targeting the three main food systems in the Mediterranean basin, that there are grapes, olives, and durum wheat. And also, MedGold has a focus also on Colombian coffee. That and in general, we can say that this MedGold was trying to close this gap between the users of climate data and the producers of of this data.
Yeah, actually, and also, and that's the point of meeting people before. I'm just scribbling notes because I'm a big scribbler. That's how, ladies and gentlemen, you can see me looking off screen. When I was talking to Luigi, I mean, I think, let me just say a couple of those points that he made in preparation, that the underlying project idea is also from a sociological and environmental point of view, because there is a biodiversity heritage in this area. That's absolutely critical. And obviously the purpose, we've heard that word already, is to make agriculture and food systems much more resilient to climate change, but it's also to preserve the area from a social, a cultural perspective, that fabric, to shrink the carbon footprint. So there is that connection between cultural heritage and food systems, and that point that, you know, how we interact with the landscape and nature and farmland, which is a critical part of that, and which really was an important part of this project. Now, sorry to hijack you there, but I thought it was only fair because I did take those. I was listening carefully when I was preparing for this speaking with Luigi. I'm just going to wait a moment to see if I need to close this off. I don't know if that lovely technical team in the chat wants to tell me whether I need to move on, and then we'll see if we can bring Luigi back and Sandro at the end. So I'm going to move on unless I get any indications to the contrary. We've already got a really nice idea of what's behind this project and some of the important issues and why it's different, So let me invite to join me now because I can see that this lovely speaker is waiting in the wings, so at least I know that I have her from CINEA. So that's the European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, Sasha Zavadlav. Now, as far as I understand it, you are a call coordinator and a project manager, and you are going to frame the next discussions. Now, tell me what you're going to focus on. I believe it's user and stakeholder expectations and experiences, or at least frame what's coming next. But tell me what the focus of your 5-minute presentation is, please.
Thank you, Katrina, for this really nice introduction. And I thank you also for the organizers to inviting me to this event and in a way kind of opening the upcoming discussion. It's something I don't do very often. So in the next couple of minutes, I would just like to stress what a pleasure it was working for me with the MedGold team. As a project officer, I had a really great position to look into all the challenges and successes of the project. And I would also maybe like to reflect a few words on their contribution to the policy strategies that they actually helped to build, but they might not always be aware how much contribution they brought in. So if I may, when I was preparing for these 5 minutes, I was actually reflecting back on the Commission's vision around 5 years ago, in particular to the call that the MedGold applied to, and which it was in very, very simple terms, asking for developing climate services concept, connect with end users and ensure replicability of this concept. Now, it sounds quite straightforward and simple in our mind when we are not in the field actually doing the job. But as I mentioned before, by following the project closely, I was able to see all the challenges, but also all the successes that the Met Goal team was facing. And I'm actually happy to see how successful you were, because in the end, you proved you can do research and innovation. You could develop tools that fit end users' needs. And on top of it, you actually involved end users into a meaningful co-design process. And as I mentioned, something that I would like to highlight is your contribution to building policy strategies. Now, they might seem small in terms of a project level, but in the Commission side, we look at them from a really broader perspective, from portfolio side. So on this last point, I'm more aware of what was happening at EU level. But what I can say is that your results and experience contributed to the preparation of some important strategies, starting with the European Green Deal, the new EU adaptation to climate change strategy, and to the building the framework of the Horizon Europe missions funding programs, in particular the one tackling adaptation to climate change and the one on soil health and food. So your contribution may not have always been obvious, but trust me, when there was a lookout for excellent examples, Met Gold regularly popped up. And to conclude, I want to thank the consortium for their great work. I know this is not our last day with them, but still, for all the community now listening to this live streaming, I wish these 2 days to be fruitful and filled with new ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And absolutely, it's just so delightful to hear that. I think we've got lots of sort of very proud and smiling people behind the scenes, and absolutely critical to make that link with the bigger picture, with the bigger framework and EU policy. So, and one question, because I can see Sandro is there. He is going to have his moment in the spotlight. Absolutely. For a very quick answer, if I may, you said meaningful co-design process. Define for me what that means, meaningful, because there's lots of co-design, co-creation, co-production. It is the word of the moment, the verb of the moment. What do you mean by meaningful?
For me, meaningful means that they were really listening to end users' needs. They were building tools together with them. They were fixing them. There were field tests. There were lots of discussions. I know that the team spent a lot of time, including the end users, or better stakeholders. So I think it was not just one survey and then we do it. It was really interaction for 4 years, if I'm correct.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us, and also just for being so concise. You did your job beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katrina.
Sandro, I think
yes,
you're there.
I'm back.
Oh, hang on, no, Sasha, we prefer Sasha. We want more women. That's it. We don't want you. There's too many men, for goodness sake. I mean, lovely gentlemen, but there's too many. Sandro, yes, you're there. So
yes,
can you
I'm
pick
back.
up that story? I was talking about the importance, I was trying to relay what Luigi had said to me, and the importance of this biodiversity, this cultural heritage from all these different economic, socio-environmental standpoints. Tell us more. What did we miss out on the part of the MedGold story from you?
Yes. Well, first, one starting comment I want to say is that I've been part of the MedGold coordination team until May last year. And then since then, I've been seconded to the regional government here in my region where I live. And this fact has given me the privilege to look at MedGold from a different perspective, from a different angle, and appreciate in a different way the value of the project. When we started MedGold, it was in a way quite understood that the creation of climate services was essentially a kind of a top-down process driven by, for example, the EU climate adaptation policy, with climate scientists having a driving role in the development of climate services. When we started MedGold, we have reversed this process since day one, or maybe I have to say since day -1, because we started with users, with engaging users of climate services before the starting of the project, during the writing of the proposal. Okay. Then users of climate services have played in MedGold the role of work package leaders. So they really had a driving force to the project. And then during the project, users have continuously been active in selecting the relevant information, in deciding how to organize the information, for example, in the design of the MedGold dashboard, in deciding how to represent information visually, in defining ways to make uncertainty understandable and then information usable. And so the ultimate goal of this process was to create trust in the potential added value of climate services. And the development of MedGold dashboard, for example, is a good example of a process that can build trust. So for the development of the MedGold dashboard, for example, we have started the project with just a vague idea of we have to build an ICT platform to process the data. Then we started the design of the dashboard with the users, and we have with users from the wine sector as the first input, but leaving the whole construction and design process open to all users in the project. And we ended up with a rather sophisticated prototype with that now international organization and industrial partners in MedGold are in a way willing to pay for having it. And so this is, I think, the best legacy that MedGold can leave. So having something that users might want to pay to continue use the tools that we have developed during the project.
Thank you very much. And what I pick up particularly from there, and that's nice that you say you had these obviously different perspectives, and that's something I think we're going to hear more about, to make uncertainty understandable in no more than a sentence. Before I just check in with Luigi, because we're some minutes behind, if there's anything that he missed, just in one sentence, what does that mean to a layman? What do you mean, make uncertainty understandable?
It means that we have expressed uncertainty in the language that users use during their everyday operation. And that was the point. Okay. Instead of using the language of scientists and climate experts.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Now, we are a few minutes behind. Look, we've started and we're already behind. Don't worry, we'll catch up. You will get your breaks between the two sessions today. That's a message to our lovely audience. But Luigi, I don't know if you're that you are behind. So fill in the gaps from where you kicked off, just a couple of key points before I close this first part, because I would hate for you to not have your moment in the
Thanks. You did an incredibly good job. And one thing that I wanted to remember the audience is that what you just said, Katrina, the huge value that we have in our biocultural food systems in the Mediterranean basin, we try to put it through the climate service device in order to give it back to the society, and we replicate the same paradigm with another globally recognized heritage like the Colombia cultural coffee landscape. So the same thing we did in the Mediterranean basin, we try to do it with another completely different geographical, climate, cultural context in the world. So this is something that I wanted to remind, because it's really crucial to the project, the transferability side. So making an impact not only here in Europe but globally, because our food systems are really a cornerstone of the global sustainability transition in general.
Thank you. And absolutely, I'm just waiting to cut. Absolutely, very, very good point. And I'm glad I asked you back to make it. You are so right. And again, that's going to, I think, percolate through our discussions today. But you are right, transferability is critical. How does this all fit within and alongside all of the other initiatives, but within the global context? And that's so important to say, particularly in a world where we're all kind of working in our silos, even though we know that climate change is something that there's absolutely no point in doing that. So thank you so very much. You've been brilliant. Later, when you pop out of this session, of course, people might have questions for you, so keep an eye out on the Swapcard platform. I'm going to crack on. Thank you, Luigi. And I don't know why everybody disappeared there apart from Matteo, but Matteo, I don't know, he must be bionic. He managed to stay online and everybody else disappeared apart from him and me. Anyway, thank you so much for that very concise intro. And already it feels just, I don't know, very authentic, very credible, very impressive, this project. So we've got another sort of 3 speakers who are part of the next bit of our session, and they're going to bring their diverse user perspectives. You've heard it already: olive, grape, durum wheat, how it all worked for them within MedGold. Why did they get involved? What use do they have for climate information? And I think what you would agree from what we've heard from our first 5 speakers, what specific information needs do they have? Don't forget, you can pose a question in the chat, and those questions I will pose to them in the last part of the session. Keep that question or comment super short. That's critical. So let me first invite them all to screen. We have Javier Lopez, who is a technician in the RD&I department at DCOOP, which is the largest cooperative in Southern Europe, the biggest olive oil producer in the world, and a leading wine producer, in addition, I believe, to operating supply, stock breeding, nuts and cereal sectors. I hope that's broadly correct. I can see you, and I can see our next speaker there. And we also have Antonio Grassa, who is head of R&D at SoGrape. That's a family-owned wine company that expanded actually from Portugal to the world, so other areas. So it has a nice global footprint, and he is scientific secretary with the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Expert Group of the International Organization of Vine and Wine. So he sort of has various hats, and he does actually sit on technical committees of other wine sector organizations in Europe and Portugal. And we also have Chiara Monotti, and she is senior purchasing manager at Barilla, which is actually a family business. I was surprised to read that. I didn't know that. Established, wow, in the 1800s, the late 1800s, offering diverse food products worldwide. I think you'll probably have a lot in your kitchen cupboards. Now, I'm going to give each of you, I just wanted you to be able to say hello. I hope I have given the right information as a start off. I want to give each of you 5 minutes to sort of share your experience. And I'd like to start with Javier, please. So there you go. Now, the question is, if you have a presentation, I think you know how to use it. And don't forget at the end, don't click again, just leave it on the last slide. So if you have any problems, the technical team can take over. But otherwise, I will pop back at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrina. Yes, I have a presentation. I believe you can hear me well, and see the presentation.
I can't see it yet. I'm having a look at the live, and I still see me. Hang on, there we go. I've disappeared. There you go.
Okay. My name is Javier. I am a researcher at DECOM. DECOM is a second-degree cooperative, Spanish second-degree cooperative agri-food that's work to increase the benefit of our members. DECOM has several agri-food sectors, as you can see in the slide. But in MedGold, DECOM is the industrial partner from the olive industrial partner. Because DECOM is the first producer of olive oil and table olive in the world. As you can see in the presentation, DECOM has to manage a very large number of table olive, around 100,000 tons, and olive oil around 200,000 tons, and coordinate around 120 olive mill. It is a great challenge. In the next slide. Okay, Regarding our motivation, well, we have two main motivation to take part in MedGoal. First, one of our value as agri-food secondary cooperative is the innovation, and this project is the perfect opportunity to increase our knowledge of climate service. And we are able to assist if our cooperative and the olive sector are ready for this type of information. But also the COI is subscribed to the Sustainable Development Goals from United Nations, including the Action 13, in which the MedGoal project can play a critical role to achieve our set objective. In the next slide, in terms of our needs, although all the actors are representing in the cold value chain, farmer, olive mill, and other, we focus on some of needs from the COPS department that are affected by climatic conditions. For example, the pest and fertilizer advisory service for our supply and service department. The quality department could use some bioclimatic indicator to predict the quality of the olives. On the other hand, the olive oil production changes every year, what affects one, the price of the olive oil, which is critical for the commercial department. Two, the number of the samples that must be analyzed by our laboratory. And third, the logistics department has to coordinate the capacity of our olive mills and the COTS olive oil tanks. Finally, to conclude, the interest in the climate survey is different according to actors in the olive production chain. We can assume the subseasonal time scale is useful for farmers and agronomists to help them make better crop management decisions, such as irrigation or harvesting time according to the temperature and precipitation prediction. Regarding the next scale, the seasonal forecast could be useful for first and second degree cooperative in terms of predicting the number of olives that will be produced for the next will be transformed into olive oil for the next campaign, or predicting the evolution of key pests in the following months based on some bioclimatic indicator. And finally, the climate projection could be information or interest for second degree cooperative, association, or even government to set the possible climate change mitigation measure, and so the more suitable production area for the olive tree regarding the expected change in the future. That is all from my side for now. Thank you.
You will be back. You are absolutely right to say the words for now. But, you know, I think what was really interesting in your presentation was hearing how the information is used by all of those different actors in the core value chain within production. You know, what, and even there, you said at the end, can also, of course, be interesting for government in terms of putting in place mitigation measures. So really interesting to hear and to get a sense that this is very heterogeneous, how it's used and what the needs are. So beautifully interesting. I am going to ask you back in a bit because I do have some questions for you, but I'm going to crack on and hear from your two fellow speakers in this part of our session, and I will come back to Javier in a moment. Now, I can welcome now, and he calls himself this, the wine guy. I'm welcoming the wine guy, Antonio Grassa, to join me on screen, because he was a winemaker. And what was very interesting when I talked to you, Antonio, when we met before this event, you said, you know, what's so interesting is you've seen over time, you know, how climate impacts on grape quality, which I think you're going to talk about. And so you've seen this evolution. So you are very, very well placed to talk about the value of this project and, you know, what your own experience has been. Do you have slides to share with us, Antonio? You know, yes, I do,
Katrina. Yeah, good morning.
You know the drill. Thank you.
I hope I have everything under control. Let's have a go.
No worries.
Thank you very much for your words.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, here we go then. So yes, okay, here we go. So yes, Sograp is a wine company. It's the leading wine company in Portugal, and we do have a global footprint, having started in 1942 in this country. We spread a bit around the world, always keeping the family company pedigree all around. So we were founded in 1942. Today, we are also producing wine after Portugal in Spain, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand. We also have distribution companies in several important markets for us, like the United States, UK, China, Brazil, and Angola in Africa. We understand wine as a product of people and a product for people. That's why climate has such an important aspect to this. And that's because this is the main function wine is for. It's for social bonding. This is what we use it for. And this social bonding comes from the emotions that wine gives us. And those emotions come from taste. So understanding how climate affects taste is really important to understand what we are doing and projecting what we do into the future. So in this picture, for example, we have a group of nice people enjoying wine. And today, with the services that we developed in MedGold, we can look back in time into the year the wines were produced, see how the climate was, and understand how that climate has shaped the taste we are feeling. By the way, this is part of the team of Sograp that joined also in the design of MedGold, and as it was said before, part of those people that have been involved since day one in co-designing what we have today. But there is another community to wine trade, and that is the community of producers, people who work the land, people who are there every day under the rain, under the sun, and who have to make decisions as to how they should better develop their activity in order to make the grapevine thrive, and most important, to make the grapevine produce what is needed so that the wine coming from those grapes has that taste that makes the emotion. So for this, in the climate services we have developed, we have created seasonal forecasts that allow us to peer into the future about 7 months and allow the grower and farmers to understand if they will need to beware regarding the possibility of having pests or diseases, if they are going to need irrigation, if their vegetation is going to grow fast or slow, and therefore adapt in terms of procuring products, labor, and planning their actions all year long. By doing that, they become more efficient and at the same time more resilient. But there is also a last, not least important aspect to winemaking, and that is the land that we sculpt. Winemaking is a tradition. It's a very old tradition with mankind, for civilization. As far as we can peer back into our past as a civilization, there has always been wine around. And we have developed full landscapes around the creation of this product. Now, it's really important to be able to look into the future and understand if under the future climate, 30, 50, 100 years from now, will we still be able to have the necessary conditions to make wines as we used to have them before. So in this project, also, we have the development of long-term projections developed so that this can be integrated into the strategic planning of both individual farmers, but also larger companies, as is our case, and ensure that the legacy we received will carry on for future generations to still keep bonding over a glass of wine. I would like to finish with this sentence that goes 500 years back. It was allegedly said by Galileo, which is wine is sunlight held together in water. I don't think of a better description of to describe what we do. So thank you, Katrina.
Thank you very much. And I love the way you say, you know, social bonding over a glass of wine. I think in these times, and not least during COVID, I think people were social bonding with themselves and their families over about 25 glasses of wine a day, probably. But that's a whole other conversation.
Always in moderation, Katrina, always in moderation.
Always in moderation. Absolutely. Super interesting. And not least, I mean, I won't talk to you now because in the interest of time, but not least what you say, listen, this is all about sculpting the landscape. And of course, you also have particular needs in this sector, and those have to fit alongside a landscape in the EU, well, beyond, but certainly in the EU, where land is at a premium for so many different users, you know, whether it's biomass, whether it's, you know, so you've got all of that as well. That's stress, that to take into account in this, in that longer term.
And now we have this beautiful tool.
And now you have this beautiful tool. Absolutely. And by the way, I didn't say to the audience, but you should know this if you're looking at the programme, that of course we are going to hear about the dashboard itself that was mentioned in the opening in more detail in not too long. So Antonio, take a short breather backstage. You can listen to thank you so much. We've got our last of this particular section speaker, so that we can hear about the other important food sector, the agri-food sector that was part of this project. And here joining me is Chiara Monotti from Barilla, which also is a family company. So it would be good to hear from you, Chiara, and see where there's overlaps with what we heard from Javier and Antonio in terms of projections and seasonal forecasts and the indicators. But, you know, what's your involvement been, your needs, your expectations, slightly different. So let's hear your perspective, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katrina, and good morning, everyone. In fact, as you just said, Barilla is an Italian food manufacturer and was born in 1877. So we are at the 4th generation now. Barilla is a company which employs roughly 8,500 people, operates in over 100 countries with 19 brands, and is present with 30 production districts, 15 of which in Italy and 15 abroad. Barilla produces pasta, sauces, and ready meals, the ones that you see here on the chart on the left, which we call meal solutions, which constitute roughly 55% of the whole turnover of the company. And the rest comes from bakery products for a 45% overall. On the chart on the right, you can see that, again, regarding the turnover, we have in Italy, where is the headquarters, we have the greatest part of the turnover of the company for roughly a 43%, followed by the rest of Europe and Russia for a 33%, and always considering the main percentages around 20% regarding the Americas. So just coming down to the point of MedGold, why did Barilla participate in MedGold? As a big user of durum wheat and also pasta producer, for the great opportunity of applying seasonal predictions and long-term climate projections to durum wheat. In terms of climate adaptation, 2 climate scales are in fact important for Barilla. One is the seasonal predictions at 6 months' time. This in particular because durum wheat, differently from the olives and wine, which is produced from grapes, is an annual crop. So it is very helpful for our suppliers, which are the farmers, to get information in advance during the course of crop cultivation inside the same year. This allows them to better conduct crop activities in general, like, for example, fertilization, pest management, or harvesting. The second climate scale, which is important for Barilla, is the long-term projection, which allows to inform on changes in yield and suitable cultivation areas in the long future time. In MedGold, we studied a period between 20 and also 40 years' time. This is helpful to forecast the evolution of the crop globally, of course, but also for future policy planning, for example, or variety selection, for the potential development of new pests and diseases, and also for the future use of investments. So I was very brief up to now. This is actually the end of my very short introduction. I thank you very much for your attention, and I remain here, of course, for all your questions and also for the panel discussion that will come later on.
Thank you so very much. And to coin a phrase from Arnold Schwarzenegger, you will be back. And again, super fascinating. And what is such a privilege as well as a moderator is, you know, I don't know to what extent, perhaps less wine, but the point is we do take all of these products in some ways for granted, and it's such a pleasure and a privilege to really hear what goes on behind. And also, as you rightly said, listen, this is different, you know, durum wheat, different kind of crop, you know, it's a crop, so we're not looking at grapes and we're not looking at olive oil, and so these are the kinds of things that we need to predict, and the planning that is so far ahead. So don't forget, audience, you can put questions in, which I will pose to the speakers. I might have to marginally keep that question time down in order to gain a few minutes, but we're going to move on to the next bit of the session, and I want to just start off by saying in that the issue of stakeholder relationships arises no matter which sector I moderate, and you know, those relationships, I think you will all know that because you come from different stakeholder perspectives, those relationships and dynamic between NGOs and policymakers, between business and academia, between industry and consumers. It's really critical, but it's absolutely not the easiest nut to crack. Now, we're going to hear from 2 MedGold stakeholders on the issue of trust within knowledge exchange. We're going to hear some thoughts on how to bridge that gap between science and users and find not just perhaps common ground, but a common language. So can I just welcome to the screen our 2 next speakers. We have from the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, from the Technical Unit for Energy and Environmental Modelling, Sandro Calmanti. So, morning. Hello, I gave you a bit of a longer lead up there, didn't I? And welcome back. And also from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, we have researcher and science communicator. I love that, science communicator. Such a good job title and job, Marta Terrado. So welcome to both of you. Marta, you are going to sort of listen to your peer there. I'm going to invite Sandro to first take the floor. No more than 5 minutes if possible. I don't want to rush you. It's just a nice reminder so we have some space to hear from our audience. So Sandro, you're first. What are you going to share with us? What's the focus in 1 sentence of your presentation?
Well, I would like to, share some insights, some experience about the question of trust and how trust is built with this continuous process of knowledge exchange with stakeholders, with users of climate services, which is what we have done during the project. And, I would like to start with this list of keywords that we can take as 7 pillars of trust in climate services. And I would like to read through these important keywords, starting with credibility, which implies that the source of data must be authoritative and information must be convincing, which means that, for example, information must be presented in a professional way. And this, of course, has given a large role to research organization in being the first drivers in the development of climate services. Timeliness is an important concept. It refers to the need of synchronizing the information with key decisions that they are linked to. But although it might sound obvious in a way, as a matter of fact, since climate services tend to interact with a complex operational decisional landscape, timeliness is not always and not only a synonym for as quick as possible. This is not as simple as that. It means, in a more general way, that timing of information need, rather than being a continuous process, is usually follows a very precise schedule. And for the case of agri-food sector, is most of the times a seasonal schedule. Then climate information must be accessible. And this is particularly important because often the added value generated by climate information is not immediately measurable within this complex decisional framework. Think of the case of, for example, planting a new vineyard or selecting a new variety that Chiara was mentioning before. So climate information is just one piece of information among many different sources, and therefore it must be accessed easily and also at a reasonable cost if we want it to be used. Reliability is on one hand as a very precise statistical definition in the context of statistical forecasting, but as a general concept, it implies that information should reflect expectations in a way, not only in terms of the skill of a forecast, for example, but also in terms of the operational capacity. Of course, information must be relevant, and this implies that it must be specific, which in the context of Met Goals, for example, it means that a significant effort, a significant amount of time has been devoted to define climate indicators tailored to the different case studies. For example, specific risk indicators for grapes or a family of indicators for the study case on durum wheat. So information must be tailored. And the concept of relevance is closely related to the concept of usability, and usability implies that information must be tailored to the decision-making process, and this is usually an important challenge for the development of climate services, because usability most of the times works a bit against the concept of replicability, because as Alessandro put it very nicely at the beginning of the session this morning, climate services mean different things for different people. So, and we have seen this in Met Goal very clearly, which means then coming to the last keyword, that information must be salient. It means that information should speak to users. And I will show you an example of this in a second. It is not sufficient that information is of good quality. It must be compelling. It must really tell a story. And so I will just quickly focus on two processes that we have followed during MedGold. One is, for example, the co-design and co-development of a data stream that starts from a credible source of data. It must be designed, the data streams, in a way that it provides information and data when it is required. It must be accessible. And of course, it has been designed so that it delivers relevant data. And the other example, which was also very nice, and we have mentioned it before, is how to make uncertainty understandable. And we have been working a lot on this in MedGold because scientists and climate experts usually focus a lot on the quality of forecast to sell the value of climate services. And in MedGold, we have engaged a lot with users to identify a working definition of reliability and of the quality of data. And the dialogue with users, for example, has suggested that instead of focusing a lot on the concepts like skill score, which is the usual vocabulary of climate services, maybe sometimes simpler concepts like heat rates of a forecast are more appealing to users, and they make information more understandable and easy to accept. And so this is, you know, the main concept I want. Just these two examples I want to share with you. And I leave the floor to Marta.
Thank you. It's so hard and so interesting. And I have to say that I think 7 pillars of trust, so many of those words would just apply to us as people. I think so many of those in terms of how we trust one another. And by the way, your 7th word, salient, it's one of my favorite words. So you very rarely hear it, but it's very good. You said salient. That means the information has to speak to users, mustn't just be good quality, it must also be compelling. Can I remind our audience, if you have questions, now maybe we're doing our job so beautifully and I already have questions for these good people, so no worries, but if you do, it needs to be on the in the chat on Swapcard and they get sent to us. Right, lovely Marta, you have been very patient. So I'm going to give you the floor to follow that very, very interesting presentation. What are you going to focus on, Marta?
So yeah, I'm going to focus on a topic very similar to what Sandro explained. I'm going to expand it a little bit more and complement his explanations. So it will be about knowledge, the knowledge approach that we have applied in MedGold. And to start, I would like to have a look together with all of you to the approach that we have followed in MedGold, which we can summarize as an iterative cycle, as you can see in the screen, with different stages. That goes from raising awareness about the project in order to engage with users. Then it moves to a stage of knowledge exchange to involve the users and scientists together in a discussion. And then a stage of co-development where new knowledge is created and users are empowered. And then this stage can then continue and begin again with a new cycle by engaging with new users. And in this intervention, I will concentrate specifically in this second stage, which is about the stage where knowledge exchange occurs. And I will focus in 3 different aspects. The first will be the creation of communication materials that are suitable to support stakeholder engagement. The second, I will focus on building a shared and agreed vocabulary between users and scientists. And then the third one will be the communication of uncertainty or the communication of certainty. It depends on how we want to look at it. Then, for the communication in MedGold, we have developed different types of communication materials to engage with users. Materials like info sheets, for instance, help explain concepts and deliver key messages to stakeholders. And it's important that they are written in a terminology which is attuned to stakeholders' context. This means that we need the stakeholders to participate to help us develop this type of materials because they need to be in their language. User guides explaining how to use climate services tools created in the project have been also extremely useful, especially to those that are new to any of the platforms that have been created. And multi-language versions of these guides have been created because we believe that delivering information in the vernacular language of users also needs to be considered as a part of delivering a climate service. Then, climate scientists and stakeholders don't talk the same terminology, and that's a fact. In this word cloud that you can see, there are different terms that are difficult or confusing, let's say, to understand by non-experts. And these terms have been actually identified in a workshop with representatives of the climate services community and include words like the ones that Sandro mentioned: skill, uncertainty, anomalies, percentiles, and so on. If we take the example of uncertainty, we can see that the scientific community, and this is a definition from the IPCC, defines uncertainty as a lack of information or disagreement that can be assessed either in quantitative or qualitative terms. However, if we look at the word up in a common dictionary, uncertainty is defined a bit differently. It is lack of uncertainty, doubt, even vagueness. So the connotations of what climate scientists understand as uncertainty and what users and the society understand are quite different. And this is also something important to take into account when we communicate this information. Finally, in MedGoal, we have worked also to make the communication of uncertainty easier. Imagine that this is the prediction of the average temperature for next summer. Among these three categories that you can see, there is a higher probability that the temperature in summer will be above normal, which is the red category that you can see. However, there is also uncertainty in this prediction because the probability that temperature is not above normal is more than 50%. And apart from the probabilities, users have even more pressing questions, which is, can I trust this prediction? For instance, did it perform well when you applied it in the past? And to convey that information during the project, we have explored different ways to visualize climate information. And one of these ways has been by using quality filters. If you see this map on the right, the skill filter, which represents the quality of the prediction, is now off. And if you activate this filter, actually, you can hide those regions for which the prediction has not enough quality to be applied for decision making. And now these regions appear hidden. So the points raised in this presentation are just three from the many that have emerged during the discussions between scientists and stakeholders. And there are many more. But the main message here is that addressing all these aspects is imperative. First, to boost the uptake in climate information, and then to help stakeholders adapt to climate change. Yeah. And that's it. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're just scribbling there. I think, and you make a very important point, it's also to boost the uptake of use. The more tailored it is, the more co-developed, the more languages, the more you can get that. That was a very interesting example of the vocabulary. Then you boost the uptake. Now, if I can, I'm going to ask you, Marta, just briefly to take a moment behind the scenes, and I'm going to give us I'm going to invite back, if I may, Javier, Antonio, and Chiara for a brief, what I call, this is my favorite term as a moderator, brain box bingo. That means I have a few questions, but in the interest of time, you're going to have to be very concise. So don't forget, speakers, audience can connect with you on the Swapcard platform. That's where you can have more of a chat via video or via typing. But for now, this is the top line, please, responses to questions. Now, I'm going to start with a question that I think it can go to both Antonio and Chiara, if I may, and that is very simply, I mean, we've heard actually a lot about this, but just encapsulate in a couple of sentences the added value of co-production in a project like MedGold? Antonio, why don't you start with a beautifully concise answer? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. Well, very shortly, I think it creates a bridge. On one side, co-production allows scientists to identify real-world issues and see how they impact the generation of value for society and also for organizations. Conversely, users become aware of the limits of science and will not ask for the sky, but rather moderate their aspirations to what is actually scientifically possible. So it is this bridging of understanding between both sides that co-development allows.
Really interesting. Absolutely. Thank you. Very, very precise. And also that you keep coming back to this issue, you keep saying, and it's important, that it's identifying real world issues for society at large, because this is what we keep coming back to, because that is kind of the end beneficiary, the end user. And as I said, we're going to hear more about how this all fits in with SDGs and the wider society needs and challenges later in our event. So same question for you, please, Chiara. The added value, if you have to add something that hasn't been said, what would you define as that added value?
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank Antonio, because actually I can share my same perspective on this. In particular, because we could really, as Barilla, share our needs so that we could actually work on more tailored solutions for us. So we had the opportunity, the great opportunity of working together with people with very different backgrounds from ours. And their expertise allowed finding solutions for climate services in practice with real cases which we could apply actually to Durum Wheat. So this was really a tremendous help and added value overall to have very different expertise from ours to get connected and to find the right solutions to the real problems and to the real cases that we had.
Thank you very much also for being so concise. I'm going to straight on to a next question, and it's that's important in terms of sort of your evolution and your involvement in it. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to bring in Javier, and then I'm going to ask the same question to Antonio, if I may. What type of climate information were you using before MedGold? And then how would you say that specifically there's been that evolution, so that involvement in this co-production process has benefited? Just a couple of concrete benefits. You know me, I always ask big vision, what we must do, what we are doing, but what are the actual benefits? So you can give me a couple of examples for your company or for your company's operations. So Javier, over to you first, please.
Okay, well, the co had no previous experience in this field of climate service. However, we can say that we made our estimates based on our experience and data from the past. Regarding the benefits, in my opinion, the co-developed process increased end user trust in developed tools, because the end user help to create a tool, and they can see the progress done in the tool, and know which needs are or are not solved, and the reason, even sometimes the suggestion done by the end user are implementing by the climate science in the tool, and that make you feel a little proud and you trust in this tool co-developed.
Thank you very much. And as we heard from Sandro, trust is something that needs a lot of unpicking. One word, it's very, very complex. And just one element that's not there can mean that trust that can lead to a lack of trust or put a dent in the trust. Antonio, something concrete that we can see. We've heard lots of good things. We've already got a good grasp of benefits, but a couple of concrete things.
Well, very easily. Before this, we were mostly using weather forecasts for very short periods, like 5 to 10 days, which would not allow us to project our planning more into the future. Or we would have to use climatology, that is, the past climate as a model for what would happen in the future. Now, the problem is that with climate change, the only thing we can be certain of is that the past is not a good forecast of the future. And therefore, we were using information that was not actionable to make our vineyard planting decisions, choice of varieties, if we would need irrigation or not, and so on and so on. So on top of that, we also got information from weather stations that were mostly from the National Weather Services. And those weather stations are mostly located in urban areas that do not represent well what's going on in the countryside. So the possibility of using in a fast and accessible and understandable way information coming from the Copernicus data store that pretty much has reliable information for all points in the global surface has been a major advancement to our capacity to plan strategically.
Okay, thank you very much. And as we said, you said fast, which is important. And also, as Sandro said, timeliness doesn't necessarily mean as quick as possible either. I mean, I know you meant it in this context, but it has a very, very specific meaning. So challenges, I mean, it has sounded very rosy thus far. However, it is obvious that there are challenges. I mean, in that rosiness, even we heard from Marta there that speaking the same language, we had a very, very concrete example, very, very sector specific needs, critical. But I am going to ask about challenges, and at this point at 11:18, let me let our audience and speakers know I will close this session 15 minutes later at 11:30. We had a few technical hitches at the beginning, but you will get a break and you will get lunch before the afternoon parallel sessions, don't worry. So challenges, just very briefly, let's focus on some of those main challenges, and obviously it's always helpful. Were they open-ended and they somehow are still ongoing, or they got solved? That's always helpful to hear. Chiara, let me start with you, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrina. Yes, the main challenge actually was something that was already cited by many speakers before, is actually setting the scene between the users and the scientists. This was crucial at the beginning of the project overall. And also, as Marta was saying, we actually held a workshop on that with all the users and all the scientific community so that we could actually find a common language, set the real path for everybody, define a glossary, as well as also basically coming to the right climate terminology. So actually this was the first very important step that we all took in order to get to the different points of view, connecting to get to the same path.
Interesting, glossary, absolutely. Thank you for that. And it was so clear. I mean, you are echoing exactly what Antonio said. You say that, you know, this user scientist scene setting, and he said, listen, we've got to bridge that gap between the scientists identifying the real world issues and the users who have to be aware of the limits of science, and drilling down into the details of a glossary and ironing out definitions being a critical part of that. Let me come to Javier. Sorry. What if you had to pick one challenge during the process and how it was solved? What would you focus upon?
Yes, I fully agree with Chiara. Medgold has caused a constant knowledge sharing from all partners. We have had to speak the same language. Yeah. But also a great challenge that the core has had to face was the assist all the information from our value chain to identify which of them could be used to reach the goal of the project. We had many internal discussion with the main DevOps department, several types of interaction with between the code and MedGold, in which we had to be sure we were understanding each other correctly. Maybe, in my opinion, it was our main challenge. Yes.
Did you have those internal discussions with a glass of Antonio's wine in hand and some and a plate of Barilla pasta? That's the question. That's critical, you see. I would be happy to have chats if I had all of these delicious products to hand. Expectations. I've got a couple more questions. So first of all, to you, Antonio, I mean, expectations. One always has expectations of a project. Did you have them? Did they change? Were they delivered on? Did they evolve? Just give us a little bit of a feel.
Yes, very much. Actually, that was also a challenge because which was managing my own expectations during the project. Because I came in the project and when we started interacting, I was starting to think, wow, we have here the possibility of really starting to have a crystal ball that is going to tell us exactly when it's going to rain, where, and so on. And then I had a reality check and realized that the science is still not that advanced, so it's not going to go there. And there was this moment where I was kind of not depressed, but a little bit disappointed that it wouldn't go there. And from then, from that point up, I started to create the real expectation of what was feasible and how that could actually play into making value to what we do. And that building of expectations from that reality check on was really very important, because instead of trying to aim for something that would be blue sky, I started to understand that we had to change the way we thought about climate predictions.
Right. Yeah,
and not just having the climate predictions change the way they thought about us. And so we started in agriculture. People have this habit to be very deterministic about the way how they think. And what this has shown me and my team is that we have to have a more probabilistic approach. And we have to understand probabilities, uncertainty, and make our decisions based on managing those probabilities, which translates as managing risk. That was one of the greatest insights we had in this process.
Thank you. Very interesting. Very interesting. Just a minute each, because I need to close at 11:30. Antonio, I'll come to Javier first. So we heard there from Marta, we need to boost uptake as well. I think, but I guess I will ask, do you think there is an added value in making co-production a more widely used approach? For me, it's a no-brainer. You might disagree, but just one, and I mean beautifully concise, one way we can do that. Javier, what would you say?
Well, absolutely, yes. I believe co-production progress in topic of new technology for the agri-food sector, like MedGold, is a key. How can we do it? It's a very good question. From my experience from MedGold, I believe there can be different valid answers. However, I believe that one of the best in the MedGold co-development strategy has been to have always open communication channel between the end user and the developer of climate service. In our case, well, I believe have periodic meetings with this part of the production progress is the best or one of the best strategy to apply the co-development process.
Thank you. Antonio, what would you say? A different, just one and very concise, please. How can we get an uptake? How can people plug into this and be a part and use this co-production approach?
Ownership. I think that's the key word for co-production, because the user becomes a co-owner of what is developed. His needs are understood in the beginning of the process, not in the end. He's not being fed something. He is actually growing something together with people who are experts in what they do. And that makes the user owner also of the product that is produced, and he is implicated. When you do that, you don't have the usual valley of death between the creation of the invention and the innovation that will put it to good value. Ownership for me is key here.
Thank you. I tell you what I'm going to do. We have only 2 minutes left. I'm going to have a last word from Chiara, because you haven't spoken for a while. I'm going to ask our lovely three, I'm going to release them, and I'm going to have, and I mean a super short last word from Sandro and Marta, just if there was anything there that they thought, oh, damn it, I wish I was there on screen to answer one of those questions. So Chiara, last word from you, something you didn't get to say.
Yes, thank you very much, Katrina. Actually, I completely agree with what Antonio and Javier said. So basically, we already spoke about the challenges, and the point was really to find the common ground about what we were expecting as users that thought that could be possible in terms of reliability of the forecast, and then what actually was truly possible in terms of probability. And then we start building from there and understanding what could be the value for us as Barilla, and also as the other partners that worked with us on the durum wheat sector inside MedGold.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. And also about managing those expectations and coming with an open mind and evolving with the process. Thank you so much. You three have been brilliant. I'm going to ask the technical team if they can, just briefly, before I take people into the break. Marta, Sandro, 30 seconds each. 40 seconds each. If you can join me, let me give you the opportunity, because I like to be very balanced when I moderate. Was there anything there? Ah, man, the audience didn't hear this, and it's important that they do. So Marta, Sandro, let me start with you and we'll close with Marta. Very briefly, anything you need to unmute yourself? There's always one. It was you. No worries.
Yeah.
What did we not hear, or what do you want to underline?
I would like to underline and come back again on the concept that Antonio has put forward about changing expectations and changing the vocabulary. Sometimes I've also mentioned this before. This is what we have done, for example, about the concept of uncertainty and thinking about how we represent the skill of the forecast. This is something that, from my perspective, for example, has changed a lot during MedGold, and I understand now that maybe I have to put things in a more simpler way. It doesn't need to get, skyrocketing. Sometimes simpler information, but it's something that can become immediately useful.
Okay, thank you so much, Marta. Now we just have a question coming in right at the end. Perhaps we could answer that online. I think it might be wise. But let me just come to Marta. What resonated for you, or what did you want to underline, or what didn't you hear and you need to tell the audience?
Yeah, as Sandro picked the expectations, I would pick the ownership idea that Antonio also mentioned, because I think we haven't expanded a lot on that. Just Antonio mentioned it. And I think this has been key in the project, because this has allowed us to somehow empower the users that we have in the project. It's not us, it's all together, of course. So they are convinced enough to go out there, to go to their communities and spread the word on the services that have been developed and on the usefulness of these services. And this wouldn't have been possible without the users, because they are the ones who have the contacts and who have a reputation, let's say, in the sectors they will be listened to. So it's a great way to help in the dissemination and helping that this uptake, this final uptake of the services by society.
Thank you very much. Let me just see, maybe this is one for you, Sandro, but it's got to be quick and maybe it could be more sort of answered more broadly online, or whoever wants to jump on and answer this. In the EU in 2016, there were 10.5 million agricultural holdings, 2/3 of which were less than 5 hectares in size. So it means different farm sizes, different needs, different types of awareness of climate services, climate science, and so on. Did you consider defining ways to respond to these different needs?
Yes, yes. This was one of the objectives of the project. Translate information, having in mind this issue of the complexity of the landscape of users we are talking to. This was actually the first message again from Alessandro. No, climate service is a different things for different people. That's a clear challenge now for each one of us.
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to get into a broader conversation, whoever posted that online, don't forget you can call for one of these good people to have a broader chat. So I slightly exceeded the time, and the question always comes in at the last minute. You ask and ask and ask, and then bam, something comes that needs hours of discussion. So let's take a break now, 30 minutes until 11:45, okay, ahead of our second plenary session today towards useful and usable climate services. We're going to focus a little bit more on the technical aspects of the co-development process of climate services, on delivering that useful and usable information. And we heard usability, that was in Sandro's list when he talked about trust, and also on evaluating the value for users. So take a quick browse of the Swapcard platform. Seriously, there are so many opportunities to hook up with speakers and fellow participants, find out more about the MedGold project. See you at 11:45 sharp. Thank you so much to all my delightful speakers and to the lovely audience for your attention. See you soon. A very warm welcome back to our audience and a new lineup of speakers to this second 90-minute plenary session. It's called Towards Useful and Usable Climate Services. Those are very important words. I think we're going to find out why in this session. And as I said before the break, this session focuses on the overall, on the more technical aspects of the co-development process of climate services. We explored a lot about that meaningful co-development in the first session, including how the information is tailored to create fit-for-purpose climate services and to deliver, there we go again, useful and usable information. And we'll also continue evaluating the value from an economic, from a social, and from an environmental perspective that it brings to users and, well, to society at large. So I think we should have a slide to have a look at who is joining us in this session, because again, we've got these kind of different parts. We've got a little bit of a puzzle there, so take a moment to have a look. And of course, on the Swapcard platform itself, you can also read the bios of speakers for those who provided them, and I think that's most of them, and you can have a look at what's coming up. So let's dive into the first 15 minutes. It looks at co-developing tailored climate information for decision making. We heard that word tailored from Chiara in our first session. It's absolutely critical. So let's just meet them first. We've got from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, Climate Services Team Leader Nube Gonzalez. There you are. From the European Commission Joint Research Center, we've got Senior Researcher Andrea Torretti. And from the National Observatory of Athens, Research Director Christos Janakopoulos, or Janakopoulos. I may not have put the accent in the right place. Forgive me. So you each have 5 minutes to share your thoughts and your experiences as technical partners. Again, for our audience, you can send in a super short question, please not at the last minute. I won't pose it immediately, but later. Now, this really is a question of ladies first. Nube, we're going to start with you. You do have slides, but on this occasion, the technical team is going to operate them. So, of course, you call for the next slide when you need it. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Good morning, everyone. As Katrina said, my name is Nube Gonzalez. Please go ahead. Next slide. Let me start this presentation by showing you this infographic that is made with Lego bricks, in which I think is a very well way of illustrating the idea of the data are not synonymous of information. So in the top part of this slide, we can see a bunch of Lego bricks that are all mixed up around, and they are representing the data. And then if we would like to obtain information, we have to process this data and that to have information just in the bottom part of the slide. And on top of that, if we would like to this information to be ready for use for decision makers, it's really important to involve the decision makers within this processing of the data. So something similar of this happening with the climate data. So next, please. So briefly, let me explain what is climate data. Climate data is coming from a climate model, and a climate model that is just in the center of the slide is a mathematical representation of the physical processes of the Earth climate systems. That is on the left part of the slide. Next, please. So, as I said before, climate data is not the same as climate information, and this is what I would like to show you here with this step. So, in the first step, the blue one, we have the climate data. That is the data coming from the climate model that I explained you before, and in the last step, on the red one on the top, we have climate information ready to use by the MedGold user. So basically in between what we have is several steps in which we have correct the biases associated to the climate data. We also have assessed the quality of the climate data, and also we have communicated the uncertainty associated to them. We have also tailored a little bit more the climate information by creating a specific indicator. And at the last step, we have been exploring different visualization in order to present this information to a broad community of users in an easy as possible way. So basically, I explained this like a very linear process, but in fact, it's not that linear, because in every single step, we have been interacting with users. So for instance, in the beginning, we would like to know what are the user climate needs, for instance. Then at a later stage, we will be exchanging knowledge. And then at the later stage, we have co-developing together with them climate information, useful, and also co-developing with them the MedGold dashboard. Next, please. So basically sorry, I think there are some problems here. So yeah, I think you can hear me well now. Yes, as I say, within MedGold dashboard, we have been providing climate information at different temporal scales. We have provided information at seasonal temporal scales. That means information up to 6 months into the future. And also we have been providing information, climate information, for the forthcoming century. Next, please. In the dashboard, we are providing climate information at 3 different levels of complexity. We have provided information relative to essential climate variable as information for temperature or rainfall, but also we have co-developed together with the user some climate-related indicator, as for instance, some number of days above or below a certain temperature threshold, for instance, that can be interesting for some particular decision makers. And also we have go one step forward, and we have provide risk indices that basically we have a couple of examples here, for instance, the sanitary risk index, or also some heat-related risk index. So I'm gonna leave it here and allow my colleagues continue with this explanation of the co-development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Absolutely super interesting, and filled in the next bit of the puzzle. We are going to hear about the dashboard, this mysterious dashboard. Well, we all know about the dashboard. We're going to find out more about it shortly. Just one quick question and I'm moving on. Just be concrete, if you will, Nubia. You said correct biases associate with climate data. So give me a concrete example of that, of correcting. What bias would it correct and how?
Yes, so basically the climate model are not perfect. So this means that the climate model maybe are not able to fully reproduce all the physical processes behind the climate system. So then, for instance, I don't know, an example can be that one particular model can have the temperature over the Atlantic Ocean higher than the temperature is in the observation.
Okay.
So this means a bias. It's a kind of systematic error that the model reproduces. So our role here is to remove those biases in order to post-process the data and the data be ready for use by the decision makers.
And one more I'm going to pick up on, and it's so important because you do obviously make that distinction between data and information. That's exactly where you started. In the last session, Sandro was talking about compelling, I think when he used the word salient at the end, and he was talking about trust, the information needs to be compelling and of good quality, or the data. So when you said they're assess the quality, what for you is poor quality data? What would you flag up and go, oh, that's poor quality?
So basically what we do is we compare the prediction of the past with the observation. We systematically compare them, and we try to see how many times the prediction has matched the observation. So basically this is what we call a skill, and then the skill need to be positive in order to have an added value for user to make use of them.
Thank you. And I do pick up, you said you interact with your user throughout every single step, including in, creating the dashboard. Okay, hold that thought. If we have questions, I'm saying again to the audience, just in case you weren't listening or you're having a cup of tea, keep your question short, put it in the chat of Swapcard, and we will endeavour to pose a few at the end of our session. Let me move directly now on to Andrea Torretti, if I may, and you also, I believe, are going to share a presentation. What are you going to focus on, Andrea? What are you going to bring to us today?
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. I'm going basically to continue this journey into climate services, the added value, and why MedGold has been so important in actually bringing climate services towards users, and users actually towards climate services. So I will briefly talk about these points and what MedGold has been achieving in the last 5 years.
Okay, perfect. So I think you have some slides, which if your clicker works, you can, there we go, forward yourself. Just don't forward. When you get to the last one, leave it. Otherwise, you'll get taken back to the beginning. So don't click again when you reach the end. Okay.
I'm trying to, I think now I see the, can you see the slide, the second one?
The slide, absolutely. Yep, can see you and the slide.
Yeah, perfect. I hope you can see the second slide because I see only the, do you see the second slide or only the one with the title?
Just see the main slide, co-developing tailored climate information for decision making.
Because I moved to the second one, but you cannot see.
Hold a moment. There we go. There it was. Now it's gone. Hang on. There, there it is.
Here we are. Yeah, perfect. So this slide is basically to explain why climate service is so important. If we look at what might happen in the coming decades, basically we know that climate change is going to affect all the key socioeconomic sectors. But when it comes to agriculture, well, agriculture is really exposed and vulnerable. It is also actually contributing and determining part of the climate change. If we look at extreme events, for instance, extremes such as the severe drought that affected a big part of Europe in 2018 and actually caused huge losses in the agricultural sector. Well, this event in 2-3 decades from now, basically they are going to become the norm. So they might occur almost every year. And climate projections basically tell us that there might be remarkable reductions in productivity of the main crops, especially in the southern part of Europe and the Mediterranean area. And also the climate suitability of the current wheat-producing regions of the world might be severely affected by climate change. This is why we need to adapt, and this explains why climate services are so important. We need to adapt in a sustainable way, meaning that by adapting, we also need to make sure that we mitigate and we actually assure that agriculture contributes to the mitigation goals. So we need to develop agricultural systems that are able to respond to both short and long-term changes. And this is why climate services are so important, and they are essential in having and implementing an effective adaptation strategies. That is targeting, that will need to target different time scales, the next 6 months, the next 5 to 10 years, but also the next 10, 30, and 50 years. But also an effective climate services must address the needs of different users, going from farmers to stakeholders at national level, and even stakeholders and policymakers at the European scale. What is a climate services? Basically, a climate service is a kind of a complex system that is transforming data into information. So from one side, at the input level, we have observations, climate predictions, climate projections, data on the specific sector. For instance, in the case of the agricultural, yield data, but also soil information. We have expert-based knowledge that is a key component of a climate services. Then we have a second level. Well, basically, we develop a modeling approach that is transforming this data into information that may be as complex as needed. For instance, based on indicators, biophysical economic models, a combination of the two, and also recently AI models. And finally, we can offer and propose to users this information that can support decision to react and adapt to the short and the long-term changes. Actually addressing the need of, as I said, of farmers, for instance, in supporting their choices in the agro-management strategies or decision in planning the infrastructural development, in breeders, to support the development of new cultivars, but also supporting food companies in their investment planning. Regional to national policymakers represent another important set of users because they will need this information to develop plans for the futures, but also EU stakeholders, for instance, to support the market stabilization and the trade mechanism. Clearly, the agricultural sector is one of the most complex sectors. Well, there is a very high-level interaction between the biophysical component and the human one. And this system is so complex that, of course, it is not as simple as one might think at the beginning to actually design a climate service that is actually looking at the different needs of the users that are involved in this sector. And when we look at the local scale, basically we need to design and we need to transform data into information that are actually informing on actions that users, let's say farmers, need to take in their working daily life. This is just an example of what Medical has achieved. So Medical has taken simple climate data, let's say climate predictions, and transformed into information, for instance, to support the choice of the best varieties to be sown that are minimizing the risk of losses that might be connected with climate extremes. And this was possible by basically combining complex phenological model with indicators that were actually tailored to the specific crop and to the specific local conditions. So what is the future? So we have developed these climate services. The future is bringing us basically towards a new era, and new possibility will be offered by initiatives such as Destination Earth that are aiming at developing digital twins of the Earth and of all the components.
Thank you. Oh, I think that was the technical team jumping in there to give you a time indication, Andrea. So sorry. Yeah. It's super fascinating, and I won't stay long with you because you can come back later, but thank you very much for this sentence. You said agriculture itself, we have to show how agriculture, the agricultural sector itself, contributes to mitigation and mitigation goals. I mean, that's I think we need to just put that out there again and underline it. And when you said, you know, I think you said, oh, it seems like it might not be very complex. I don't doubt that this isn't hugely complex to develop these climate services and to develop these climate services with all of those different kinds of users. And you very helpfully cited some of them there, not least the policymakers. So hold that thought. I'm going to come now to Christos, if I may.
Yes.
I think, Christos, are you going to focus on the olive sector?
Correct.
Absolutely.
I'm going to talk about how we reached tailored climate services within MedGold, with a special focus on the olive sector. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Now, I don't know if your clicker works. If it doesn't, the tech team will take over.
I think it works.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Christos Janakopoulos from the National Observatory of Athens. I was part of MedGold mostly in the technical bits of MedGold, and I'm going to take you how we developed tailored climate services within MedGold and what type of specific information and we used to satisfy the user needs. The first parts of the project, in the first year, of course, we engage with the partners, either cooperatives or organizations in the sectors of interest, specifically here for the olive sector. We had specific workshops to understand the needs of each sector. We followed on with several online surveys and participatory workshops to continually evaluate and improve the climate services. And then we co-developed together with our users in order to achieve the appropriate timeliness of the climate services, the selection of variables, what tools we needed, how to visualize, and how to make really helpful climate decisions to satisfy the needs of our users, like pest control, harvest, or irrigation planning, or production prediction. For the olive sector, we were lucky to develop three kinds of climate services. But here I'm going to focus mostly on the dashboard, because this was common for all sectors within the project. The dashboard is a web-based application that allows the users to visualize, interact, and even download the climate data and the specific climate indices that they need, that they refer both to seasonal and long-term timescales. We also developed the Olivia platform, or improved it, for predictive pest management and physiologically based demographic models in order to capture the interaction between olive tree and olive fruit fly. How we reached the dashboard development. We had 2 workshops organized to identify the end user needs regarding the climate services for the olive sector. The first one was held in our champion offices in the COOP in Malaga, Spain. They participated agronomists from the group and shared the information of the user needs, the critical decisions, and the vulnerabilities of the olive sector. And the MedGoal partners took into consideration the provided climate information in order to develop the appropriate bioclimatic indices. Then we had a second workshop online. This was online to evaluate the climate services we developed. To see whether the outcomes was successful for our partners. Here is an example of the identified user needs. So within the olive sector, we have different time scales that the users and the agronomists of the COOP were interested in to satisfy the special needs of the olive tree. For example, for pest management, most of the users were interested for weather forecast or sub-seasonal predictions. But for irrigation plannings, they were interested both in weather forecasts and seasonal climate predictions, but also longer-term climate projections. In order to estimate olive yield, mostly seasonal or sub-seasonal climate predictions are important, but also climate projections are also important. In order to design new orchards, new olive trees, and to know about the new tree spacing, users were mostly interested in decadal or longer-term climate predictions. Here is an example of the indices that we developed and the specific purposes these indexes can capture. For example, the indices are here written down. For example, the mean summer maximum temperature, of course, this is related to irrigation and fertilization purposes. Other users said the mean winter minimum temperature is very important for plant treatment and harvest. For irrigation and treatment, the number of days above 30 degrees or above 40 degrees in the summer. But also the total precipitation in winter or annual was also very important for all the operations for the olive tree. Also the number of days of very dry days with precipitation below 2 millimeters is also very important for our users. The most important of these indices I showed before was found to be the winter precipitation. Because the precipitation that during the winter months prior to the tree flowering in the spring is one of the most influential meteorological factors for flowering and therefore olive production. So this was validated against observational and yield data for 17 years for several stations in Andalusia. And we found that low winter precipitation coincides with bad years of olive production and yield. This is very important. So winter precipitation, it was so important for the olive tree. So when you have very bad production and very bad yield, that was probably the result of very low precipitation during winter. And this was voted as the most important index by all participants in the workshops. Yes?
I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to ask you to gently round off if I may.
Okay, no, I round off, yes.
I just let the team put your slides back, but I need...
Okay. This is an example of bioclimatic index that we developed, and it shows you here the number of dry days, how it increases during the climate scenarios, and you will see that when you go to the RCP 8.5 scenario, which is the most pessimistic scenario, you can have an increase of 12 dry days in the distant future of 2071 to 2100. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm so sorry. I told you I said I would be the strictest headmistress because we have so much fabulous content. So forgive me. And there is a question. We can perhaps wait, and I will let the speakers have a look at that. That was made by Vitor Teixeira. Is there any relation with the EU project Vitigeos? What might be the main differences? So maybe you can think about who can respond to that, and you can come back at the end, because what I'm going to do, and thank you so much, Christos, so clear, and also from the point you made about the workshop that you had in evaluating. I mean, that's part of it. You have to evaluate the services that have been developed so that they can appropriately evolve, so that you know that they are both useful and usable. So thank you for that. I'm going to let you all take a breather backstage, have a think if that's a question that somebody can answer, because we are now going to have a bit of a wider look at that dashboard, okay? Because I think we need to now. It's been mentioned so many times. So who is our next speaker? Our next speaker is Federico Caboni. He is, I think, if I'm right, are you Cloud Journey Squad Leader? What's your title at LUTEC?
That's my title. That's my actual title.
It's mad. I love it. Cloud Journey Squad Leader. Oh my God, at LUTEC, which is, of course, a leading Italian and also European player in ICT services and solutions. Now, you are going to focus on the dashboard that provides all of this different information, and we heard some examples there. And as I understand, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, it was co-developed with end users from those 3 world-leading companies to transform the enormous quantities of raw climatic data into tools that can really be used, and as we've heard many times, to support important decision-making strategies.
Yes, except I'm not really going to focus on the dashboard itself, but the thing is how to obtain useful and usable information, which are 2 similar concepts but not the same. Okay. No, I'm not sure whether the clicker works, but I just say. Okay, so let's start. First, what do we mean by information? What is the goal of the project? So this is the project website. We want to turn climate-related information into added value for these 3 crops in particular, but in general. And when we talk about information, in information technology, of course, we need data. And, it works. And data is very similar to water. I mean, actually, it's not, of course, but they're similar in a lot of respects in that both are vital, both needs to be moved from point A to point B, and it's a useful metaphor, so bear with me. If you want to bring some water to a guy, to a person, you can just use a bucket. It's very simple. You put 1 liter, 2 liters of water there and bring it to him or her. But what about if you have to move a lot more of water, like 10 liters, 1,000, and to a lot of people? Now, I'm sure if 1,000 people require 1,000 liters of water each day, you won't be using buckets because they're just not up to the task. In IT, we say the bucket does not scale up well. It isn't capable to grow as the demands, the request of the system grows. And it's the same with data. How do we solve this with water? With plumbing. Plumbing is quite more complex than a bucket. I mean, it's self-explanatory. It's very complex, but it allows the system to scale. The same can be said with data. If you have to give some data to one person, you just use a drive or just send the file by email. As the input grows, so more files, more complex files, and a lot of users, you've got to have infrastructures like plumbing. And this is the infrastructure we've got in the Medgo project. It's quite different, looks maybe equally as complex, but different. I won't be going into the details of the little boxes. It's a cloud platform based on AWS. I'll welcome questions later about this. So this is what we did. And one concept, important concept, is that of scalability. As I said, there are 2 kinds. Vertical scalability just means making your server better and larger and with more CPU, more RAM, more memory, but it serves you up to a point because You can only make a computer as much powerful as the technology allows you. Also, as large and good one computer can be, it still can break. So what we do is to distribute the application in different computers, which is called distributed system. And so you can scale because you just add computers. Of course, it's not as easy as I'm saying, but it's feasible. And you automatically gain other advantages like high availability, fault tolerance, because even if one computer explodes suddenly, you've got many others. So this is the gist of it. But this is just part of the equation. This is a functional representation of the SAT platform of the medical project, which is what is the task that the platform carries on. The storage of data, so it downloads the climate data from the sources, mainly from the CDS, the Copernicus data store, but not only that, it stores it, which is not as trivial as it may seem, because we are talking about a lot of data. Then it processes it, normalizes it, bias correction, downscaling, it prepares it. Then the compute part, you've heard from Christos about indicators, indices, this is the compute part. And then the export, because no information is good if you keep it for yourself. So there is another concept of scalability. What I talked about earlier is technical scalability. We have a problem of functional scalability in that the added value we have talked about at the beginning is different for every stakeholder. Farmers, policymakers, they all this is going too fast. They all can extract value from different things. So the concept we followed is that of a highway. The highway has different exits, and it's useful the same if you take the first one, the second one, the third one. You just extract the value from the highway you want. And we did sort of the same, meaning that we implemented an exit in each step. Is over here, this clicker. In each step of this pipeline, you can extract value. You may be a researcher and you want to do your own analysis. You just use the storage part. You use the ICT platform of MedGold just as a storage of curated data sets. You want the processing to be done, you've got that. All to the end where the infamous now, I hear dashboard is, which uses the whole capabilities. Storage, process, compute, and export to a web form, which is this one. This is an old version, now it's cuter, but it uses all the possibilities because you are having to export the data in visual form, in downloadable form. We've got other exits. One of them, very important one, is the APIs, application programming interfaces. They're important because they allow the MedGold results to be connected to other systems. While the dashboard is a machine-to-human kind of interaction, the APIs are a machine-to-machine kind of interaction. So which we experimented in the project with some of our industrial partners. And it allows the MedGold data to be connected to other decision-making systems and the computers to do that all to themselves. And actually, this is all.
Thank you. Do you know what? Your world is so far from my world. It's utterly fascinating, utterly fascinating. And by the way, if you left me in charge of that computer, it would explode. So you would need backup. That was my point. I just want to really interesting understanding that the dashboard uses all of those different capabilities as you talked us through, including CAT. We've got to export the data, or what use does it have? The tailoring in terms of the different highway exits, and the fact that it's connected to other systems. Before I move on, extremely concisely, you said right at the start, yeah, usable, useful, different. Explain, one sentence, define.
Yeah, usable means that you can actually use it. And from my point of view, that was the technical part, the horizontal scalability. If it's not there, you can't use it. Useful depends on what you want. Maybe you want the dashboard, maybe you want to download the data. So this is the two levels I was talking about.
Ah, nice. Okay, thank you very much. I would be quite scared to sit next to you, but fascinated to sit next to you at a dinner party. There we go. That's a compliment, I promise you. Okay, so it is, seriously. Do take a breather, because before I invite people back in different groups to sort of do my, what I call brain box bingo question session, we do have two next speakers. Now, I did talk at the beginning, I did say that we were going to look at the climate services information provided to users through this dashboard from a set of different perspectives. So the economic, the social, the environmental, and we have two lovely ladies to do this and to complement what we've heard thus far. We have Mary Khosravi, who, and you should wave because people don't know who you are otherwise, Mary, environmental social scientist and research fellow at the University of Leeds. There you go. For me, you're on the top of my screen of the vision. And from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, environmental economist Ilaria Vigo. Now, as I understand it, Mary, you're going to take the floor first. Is that
right?
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you can let me know, what are you going to focus on in your presentation?
Yeah, as you say, this presentation is about assessing the value of the climate service. And I will focus on the non-economic aspect of the added value assessment. And my colleague Ilaria will focus on the non-economic aspect of the assessment.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I can't see full screen.
Well, I can see yours. I don't know if the audience can hear me, but I can see your screen. Are you attempting to click it yourself? We may, if you cannot see it, let the technical team click it, because we can see it. There you go.
Yeah, but I don't see it in full screen. I don't know why.
That you may not be able to.
Okay.
Are you able to still present? Because your slides are available to people on the platform. So if you're able to present, then we're mostly going to be listening to you.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Shall we go to the next slide, please? Okay. This slide, I think the process of developing dashboard was explained in the previous presentation. Nevertheless, in this slide, you can see I have summarized, the whole process in 4 steps, which shows the developing the tool over 4 years of MedGold project timeline. In 2018, we assessed the climate information needs of Sograf Wine Company through focus group. And then in 2019, the tool was developed. And 2020, we tested the tool by end users in Sograf. Bugs were defined and corrected. And then the latest version of dashboard was ready to assess. In 2021, we assessed the added value of the tool for the wine sector by end users who has been directly involved in the process. And this presentation cover these assessments. This slide shows the process of how we assess the added value of the tool in the wine sector. We started with a broad literature review in order to develop a conceptual framework to assess the climate service. And this is in here you can see the conceptual framework. Our conceptual framework covered the usability of the tool. It consists of saliency, legitimacy, and credibility of the tool. And we also consider these are about the climate information, which is there in the climate service in dashboard. And then we also consider the accessibility of the climate service. In order to start our assessment, these framework we translated into the question form and design our interview protocol. In order to assess the tool, we held a kind of participatory workshop to introduce the latest version of the tool to the end users in Sograf company, and then we try to identify their key decision in the wine sector. Then we gave them time to, like 2 months, to use the tool in practice in real life to see how usable the tool is for them, and then we started to interview them using our interview protocol. We gave them 2 months time to use the tool. In the next slide, you can see the result of the interview. Unfortunately, we couldn't assess the actual value of the tool because of some reason. The reasons has been summarized in this table. You can see, some of the end users in SOGRAPH company were not users of climate information. That's why they couldn't interact with the tool. And some of them, for some of them, that test period, 2 months period of time, was not enough. Was not the time for them to make decisions. So they couldn't use the tool. For some of them, the tool was not easy to use, and for some of them were users of weather forecast, and the tool was not, the weather forecast was not there in the dashboard. And for some of them, that they claimed that the data is not reliable enough to use it in their decision making. So we couldn't assess the actual value. So we went for potential value of using the tool in practice, and they said they can use the tool. They can use historical, seasonal forecast and climate change projection to support some of their decision. For example, for seasonal forecast, they said it is well designed to support plant protection, planning harvest time, scheduling seasonal labor, and also for projection, they claim that they can use it for making decision for purchasing vineyard or for installation of vineyard, and these kind of long-term decision they can use climate projection to support to make better decision. And in the next slide, you can see end of the interview, we asked them, could you please move to the next slide?
That one doesn't want to come up. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. This is, as I said, end of interview, we asked end user to provide us some recommendation to increase their usability of the tool in the wine sector, and these are some of their recommendation. They said that simplifying the dashboard could increase the usability of the tool. They said the tool is not intuitive enough to use it, and they suggested some simply kind of simplifying the tool, like they like to access the tool through cell phone, or graphic was a bit confusing for them. They also suggested including a kind of tutorial, like a video, to explain them how they can use the tool. And they also suggested to avoid some confusion in labeling. Some labeling was for example, for tercile categories, we have some wording like normal, above normal, and they said, okay, what normal means to people. Many people may not know what normal is, and also including weather forecast. Weather forecast is so important for the wine sector to support their short-term decisions. So they say that including a weather forecast could increase the usability of the tool. And in the next slide, which is my last one, I have summarized the challenges we face when we did this expose assessment. Like the most important one was that the period of expose assessment must need to be matched with the time scale of data. For example, when we have a seasonal forecast on dashboard, and we're going to assess the real value of a seasonal forecast, so we need to give them enough time, like a fully growing season, and let them to use the tool, use the seasonal forecast at least for a growing season, and then this can help us to assess the real value of the assessment. And also some technical challenges. They mostly say the tool is so technical for us. They are not technical expert in using the tool. So the more simple, the more usable the tool could be for the users. These are two challenges that need to be considered in the future if people, if experts are going to assess this kind of evaluation. And this is the summary of what we have done in this part of research, and a paper has been submitted to the Journal of Climate Service and can be published for more detail on this part of the MedGold project.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Really, really clear, Mary. Thank you. One, before I move on to your colleague to sort of complete from the other aspects, you said at one point, I hope I haven't got this wrong, you were talking about, they needed time to test it, wasn't always easy to use, but then you said you focused on a conversation with them to ascertain potential use and then listed that. Just be clear about what you meant, jumping from, I'm not sure we can use this, to potential use. I just missed something there in the explanation.
The main aim of this part of research was assessing the real value. We were intending to give them time to test the tool, to see how much they could use the tool in their decision making, in their role. But the test period we given them was not enough for them to use it in practice. And they needed a longer period of time to test the tool properly. So we couldn't assess the actual value, but we asked them, what is the potential? If you had enough time, like 6 months, like a growing season time, how this tool could help them in their decision making. Okay. This is the potential value.
Thank you. Super clear. Thank you very, very much. I guess there's never any surprise when people need something to be simplified or a tutorial. But again, coming back to that really interesting aspects we heard in the first session about glossary, about definitions, you said we need improved labeling. You said normal.
Exactly.
How do we see normal? You're absolutely right. I mean, so really, really good example there. Thank you so much, Mary. I'm going to turn to your colleague, Ilaria. And you're going to focus now, you're going to talk about some of the different aspects, perspectives from use. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me today. It's great to be at this final MedGold event all together. So what does it mean that a glass of wine tastes better with seasonal forecast? Well, unfortunately, we won't have a wine tasting today, but I would like to simply provide you with an example of co-evaluation of seasonal forecast applied to the wine sector. So this evaluation has the objective to identify the optimal usage of the seasonal forecast in order to minimize the rain risk in vineyards. So to give you a little bit of context, the spring rain the spring rain drives risk of fungal diseases, such as, for example, downy mildew that threat the vineyard, as well as can cause high yield of losses. In order to prevent these losses, the vineyard manager can rely on canopy management techniques and spring production product, which both require extra labor force. Normally, in January, the vineyard manager has to inform the purchase department about the amount of spraying and how much labor force to contract. So what the MedGold team has been doing is to try to develop a tailored indicator of spring total precipitation, which tries to predict the total precipitation from the 21st of April until the 21st of June, which is the period of the year exposed to high sanitary risk in the Northern Hemisphere. So what we wanted to do here is to try to identify what is the optimal probability threshold that should trigger a decision based on this indicator. And this calls back to what Antonio was explaining, Antonio from Sogeap was explaining before in his presentation on the importance of trying for the user to understand how the uncertainty and the probability works. It's for this study we have selected the Douro Valley area, and I'm pointing this out because the characteristics of the region strongly impact the vineyard characteristic, as you imagine, which also impacts the results of the analysis. The approach adopted is based on decision theory. So this means that the climate service user we assume that the climate service user has to make a decision with the goal of maximizing its objective, which we call normally the payoff. The value of the climate service is defined as the difference in payoffs between the decision taking with and without using the climate service. And co-production has also been a key part of this methodology. I won't go in detail about what's co-production. It has been already explained in previous sections. However, it's important. Oh, sorry, I'm moving around with the slides. Okay. It's important to say that the methodology is the result of close collaborations among partners of the project. And in particular, SOGEAPE has shared the knowledge about the average procurement cost and the market price in the Portuguese market area, as well as the knowledge about the best adapted vineyard strategies in the area. So with this collaborative approach, we have identified the 9 scenarios. In January, a decision has to be taken based on spring rain expectations to communicate to the purchase department, as I explained before. And the spring rain expectation can be on, above, or below average in this model. In spring, we can observe whether the prediction matched the reality, so it was a hit, or not. If in this specific case, so for this vineyard manager in this case study that we are idealizing, the vineyard manager is using as a business as usual strategy, meaning the one strategy that's usually applied without the spring rain indicator is using the assumption that the spring rain will be on a normal level. This is a strategic decision, however, that would vary user by user. So if the observed rain in spring is normal, we have a hit. But if it turns out to be a rainy spring, we may suffer a labor and a spray supply shock. Whereas if the observation is below normal, we realized that we could have saved by purchasing less spray and contracting less labor force. On the other hand, purchasing extra spray and labor force when expecting an above normal rainy period secures yield. However, if it turns out differently, this represents an unnecessary high cost that the vineyard manager has to bear. And finally, saving in plant protection product when expecting a dry season. Sorry, I see that we haven't, the slides were not crossing. So this is the case that we have an above normal period. Whereas if finally we are saving in plant protection products that when expecting a dry season, we also have a positive environmental impact that, however, we have not been calculating in this methodology. But a mistake in the decision, in this case, can lead to very high yield losses. So we have tested this simple model with 23 years of Eincast, and the results obtained, be careful, the result is obtained for this very specific situation, so meaning under this technical, climatic, economic situation, and considering this area, the specific area of the Douro Valley in Portugal. But then the results, in this case, the results suggest that when we have even only a small probability of above normal rain, the vineyard manager is on average better off to purchase extra spray and contract more labor force in advance. On the other hand, only a very high probability, if there is a only very high probability threshold, an action to protect from dry spring should be triggered. Also, it's very important to notice that climate is not the only variable affecting the decision making, and therefore more co-production is needed to include other business related risk in this model and make these results closer to the business reality of the user. So what we learned during this process is that the value of the climate service, in this case the spring rain indicator, is highly user dependent, user and decision dependent. Also, we've seen that the co-development is pivotal to understand the context and develop a meaningful exercise. And as long as co-production and as long as there is co-production capacity, this approach is replicable for any other decision and user, so all the other sector of this project and beyond. However, there are some limitation to this approach, namely we have not considered skill scores, and we do not consider non-climate variables in this analysis. Therefore, we are looking forward for more collaborations in the future and to more improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, super interesting indeed. This issue of how does the climate services, the use of climate information and sector specific also sit alongside other business related risks, skills force and so on. Very, very interesting. And also just the examples you gave of the different aspects when you were looking at the winemaking, how this data can be used. We heard from Javier at the beginning, it was all along the value chain there. You talked about the procurement, you talked about the vine manager. So really interesting to see how that all fits together. I'm going to let you take a breather off screen because I am going to release these lovely audience for lunch at 1:15. And I have some questions now. And again, I'm going to invite back. So don't go away, Mary or Ilaria, because I'll ask you for a last word. But let me invite back Nube and Andrea and Christos. And again, what I call it, and I do mean it, because if you want to be heard and your message is to be taken home and you're competing with people's stomachs that are rumbling, we need to really do brain box bingo, okay? Don't forget that our audience can contact you on the site, they can ask you questions, and that the slides are available. So I'm going to keep insisting upon that with those viewers who are with us in case you weren't listening before. But let's just we had that question I said by Vitor Texera. Is there any relation with the EU project Vitigeos? What are the main differences in the project's approach? Is that something, Nube, you could just come back on?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Victor, for your question. In fact, of course, there are, I can see a lot of synergies between the two projects. Both of them are focusing on providing useful information for the wine sector. But I think the main difference is that within Vitigeos, we are providing climate services, but not only climate services, also phenological services or disease services. So this implies that there are other type of models out of there. And then in the part of the climate, we are much focusing on providing real-time temperature, rainfall, or something like that. Whereas in MedGold, we have been focusing right on the climate services, and this means that we have the right time to co-develop and go further with the climate information. So we are not only providing temperature or rainfall, but we are providing indicators that are relevant for the decision makers. So I think this could be the main difference. Of course, if you are interested, maybe we can chat later on under this platform that we have for the final event in the corner of discussion. And yes, happy to be reached by that.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to turn to Christos and Andrea with the first question. It is again about the added value of co-development in climate services and, you know, how it shaped the services that were developed in MedGold. Can you give me some beautifully concise answers? Christos, let me start with you, please. But are you on mute? You are probably talking brilliantly. I just cannot hear you. There we go. Now you may start again. Thank you.
Okay, this co-development helped create climate services that were based actually on the user needs. So with co-development, we contributed to the creation of a more simple, a more user-friendly final version of the tool, of the dashboard that we made. We were able to satisfy the user needs to make usable and practical information and to inform on the users' activities and decisions for all the sectors. Also, with the co-development, we managed to identify obstacles and to ensure sufficient engagement with the end users.
Yeah.
And we resulted in appropriate timelines of the climate information, the correct spatial scales, the selection of the variables, the format, the presentation format, the visualization, to be able to identify decisions for pest control, for harvest planning, for production prediction.
Thank you very much. So a lot there, a lot. No, but good stuff, you know, identifying the obstacles, you know, making sure that the information delivered is practical. Andrea, a lot must resonate there. What would you add to that? What do you think is this added value of co-development and, you know, how it shaped those services in the project?
Yeah, I think, that the added value is that there is no other way actually to develop effective climate services that are to support a specific sector at different levels. So users need to interact with scientists, with policymakers, and that's the only way actually for a sustainable adaptation, given the challenges that climate change is going to pose to us. So that's my answer.
Thank you. And just stay with me a moment. I mean, you know, if you had to be, well, I don't know if you want to give any more concrete examples, but, you know, they're really benefiting the end results and the partners involved. Do you think we've covered off, you know, all of those issues of co-development? Do you think we've put them in the spotlight? Is there anything that you would add in terms of benefiting particularly the end results, but also that plethora of different partners?
I think we did actually in MedGold. It was a great example. So when we developed specific tools for the wheat sector, for instance, so this tool in different ways addressed the needs of farmers, so the very local needs of farmers, but also applying a different way. It had been addressed. It was, also addressing the needs of, for instance, EU stakeholders. Just to make a concrete example, we have implemented such a tool in the monitoring of productivity at the European scale that we use at the European Commission. So that I think is a key example to understand why MedGold has been so successful.
Thank you for that. What would you add to that, Nube? Does that what would you say in answer to that same question in terms of benefiting, you know, end results and also all of the different kinds of partners involved? You need to unmute yourself too. There.
Yes, sorry.
That's all right.
Yes.
That's fine.
I like to see the co-development as a symbiosis in which both scientists and end user benefit each other. So I mean, can you hear me well? Sorry.
Yes, we do.
Sorry, I have some back noise. Yeah, so basically, yes, I think co-development is a symbiosis, and both scientists and user benefit from it. And on one side, the scientific people have the chance to interact with user and learn about the field management and decision making. And on the other side, I think the end user have the opportunity to discover different what is important from the climate information, and also to obtain information that is really tailored to their needs. Absolutely. So, for instance, as an example could be that we can provide information at a higher spatial resolution at that local level, and or also provide information for a specific index that could be rainfall, total amount of rainfall during a spring, which is a critical period for the crop development. So, yeah.
I think it must have been immensely interesting and curious to be able to have that. I mean, I was going to say, for the scientists, they are, to use that term in English, they are quite literally getting out into the field, so to speak. And I think it must be, you know, a real privilege to be able to learn and anticipate and manage your expectations. And as we heard from Antonio, you know, also for the user to understand the limits of science, and the scientists to also kind of accept those limits themselves, which they already know, and to bridge this gap. Just to stay with you just momentarily, Nube, again, for a lovely, concise answer. I did talk in the previous session about challenges. We heard some very specific challenges that came up, and how, you know, how they were addressed. Was there anything that you would add there, what you particularly experienced or noticed?
Yeah, well, definitely, it's already said, but definitely one of the main challenges that I have found is to use a common language between scientific people and user. For instance, let me give you an example. I know that could be a bit repetitive, but I think it's important because, for instance, when we talk about the quality of the prediction, the quality of the climate information, concept like skill or reliability, that is something very useful in the scientific world, then they have different meanings when you go to the user world. For instance, the wine sector, I mean, a user from the wine sector can understand the term of reliability just like it's a prediction that they can trust in. Whereas in the scientific community, reliability is a term that tells you if the predicted probability just matches with the observed frequency of occurrence. So it's a very precise definition that is nothing to do with that. So this is why we were having a specific session on co-development, on knowledge exchange between user and scientific people. And then out of that, we created a glossary of terms in which we find a common language. Yeah,
it's absolutely fascinating. And as a linguist and as somebody who studied literature, I'm such a word collector. And even those examples and the examples we heard before about uncertainty, whether it means vague, whether it means something else, absolutely fascinating and critical to get it right. Andrea, and I have also another question for you, Christos, in a moment. I'll give you all an opportunity to say a last word. Don't worry. But let me just come back to Andrea. And I know that we are deliberately, for our audience, hammering home some of the main messages, but this is a showcase event. There has been an inordinate amount of work that's gone into this, and we really do want to make sure you've grasped it, because part of this really is about the uptake. Andrea, has it changed the way you work with climate information, your involvement in this project?
I think it has definitely changed and influenced a lot the way actually I work together with my colleagues. First, because before MedGold we had quite a naive idea of the sector, the needs, and so on. And while working with farmers, but also with food companies that were involved in the project, with all the different players in the supply chain, we actually have been experienced to the different, to the different approaches, but also to the complexity of this sector. Because we have, as a scientist, you often tend to focus on one specific aspect, and you tend to forget that there are others that are important as well. And when a farm is actually deciding what to do within his own daily activity, he takes or tries to take into account all the different aspects, and this is something that is absolutely needed when we are going to design the climate services or the adaptation strategies of the future. So this kind of comprehensive approach, this is what I think we have learned as a team thanks to MedGold.
Interesting. Let me just turn first to Christos, if I may, because we had this word come up a lot: indicator, risk index, and obviously they are tailored for very specific sectors. Could you give us an example of one that was tailored for a specific sector, that was developed, that raised perhaps interest amongst external stakeholders?
Yes, correct. We developed various indicators within MedGold, various climate indicators through co-development with the users for the specific sectors. One example, say, for the olive sector is the total rainfall indicator from October to April. That means practically the winter rainfall.
Yes.
This has captured the interest of the olive producers, because this is a key factor in olive production, because it is the precipitation before flowering starts in the spring of the olive tree. So we need to have sufficient precipitation within winter to have everything going according to plan for the tree in the months to follow, in the spring or later on. And we validated that this was very important, because we had bad and good years, and the bad years in olive production coincided with these specific indicators. When we had low rainfall within winter, we had also bad years in olive production. Similarly, for example, for the wine sector, it could be important, the rainfall over a different season. For example, the season in spring would be very important for the wine sector. Similar indicators we developed for all the sectors.
So interesting, and so much hard work. I mean, a Pandora's box. Nube, let me just briefly come back to you, because
because you have to develop specific time of the year the indicator for the particular climate variable, for the particular sector, to satisfy also the user needs. And okay, we followed the example for Andalusia and Italy also for the durum wheat. But when we had the workshop in Greece, all the stakeholders were telling us when this wonderful tool that you are presenting is going to be available for other regions to cover, for example, the whole Mediterranean.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, are there areas where, I mean, sorry if I'm asking a silly question here, where these indicators or risks indexes or indices are there is commonality across several sectors?
Some of these indicators are common around sectors. For example, the precipitation, but other sectors are more interested about the winter precipitations. Other sectors want the spring precipitation. So precipitation or very high temperatures can be common, but not exactly common. Absolutely. And of course, other regions, of course, the Mediterranean will have common needs, but I think it would be great if this MedGold tool could be extended to capture other regions within the Med or within Europe.
Oh, okay. So just when they think, we're talking, well, that's the thought for legacy, is it not? Just when you think, we worked so hard over these last 4 or 5 years, and you can work hard again. We can extend it. Nube, same thing. Did you want to just say perhaps something that hasn't been said about your involvement in the co-development process? We heard there from Andrea, kind of opening up your mind as to sector complexity. Researchers and scientists can stick in one area. Was there a way that the process changed, you know, the way that you work with climate information?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, the co-development with user had changed the way I understand applied research. Okay. In general. I mean, this is something in general, but mostly I have learned to listen first to the user, to understand their context and the needs that they have, and then think how to obtain relevant information from to obtain relevant climatic information for a specific problem they have. So yeah, in somehow I think this is the most important, but also, as I say in my presentation, I have learned that data is not the same that information. Yes. And for having information that is relevant for decision making, the climate data need to be fine-tuned following user requirement. And for that, the key actor are the user. So we really need to listen to them and then try to make the best of the scientific knowledge in order to provide something useful and actionable for them.
And that reminds me, I often say this, and as a favorite quote as we come towards the end, it's George Bernard Shaw: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. It's one of my favorite quotes, followed shortly by Epictetus. We have two of these and but one of those for a very good reason. So communication, you started there by saying I listen, I hear the problem, and then I'm trying to move towards finding the solution. So thank you to you three. I'm going to switch you out. I'm going to thank you. I'm going to very briefly bring back Federico, Mary and Ilaria, because they've been listening and they might want to say a last word before I take us all into lunch. So let me bring you three back. If I may, if the technical team can let me share the screen. The technical team know I can talk forever on my own like this, but it would be nice to see Mary, Ilaria and Federico again. So a last word, and it needs to be a brief 1 minute from each of you, perhaps something you might have wanted to answer there, something you didn't get to say within the context of delivering useful and usable information, and we delved into more of the technical side there. So Mary, do you want to start?
Yeah, this is the final event, and from my own perspective, which I've involved in the the assessment, the added value of the climate service. What we have done in this part of research was kind of unique, because most of assessment which has been done and we have seen in the literature review is about ex ante assessment, which is about the assessment of the tool before they develop the tool. But in this unique assessment which we have done in MedGold was ex post assessment. We had the tool, we interacted, we engaged with the end users and we gave them time to interact with the tool, test the tool, and then we assess the tool. So it was a kind of unique, and it could definitely add value to the literature in climate service. This is from my own perspective.
Thank you, and such a good point to make. As opposed to this ex-ante assessment, the rigor that I've grasped that went into this and continues is really what you call a unique feature. Federico, what would you like to say?
Just one last thing, because unlike my colleagues, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an agronomist, and before the project, all I knew about climate change was as a concerned citizen, and it's been a wonderful experience. And all my work life, I'm trying to bridge the gaps between different kinds of knowledges. I work in IT, but I had classical studies, and this has been a wonderful example of this. Not only between the IT part, that, as you say, is a lot of people say what you said to me before. It's just a world that's very far from me, but it's not, because you are hosting a presentation on a technological platform. And so there was the IT part, but also the climate part, the agricultural part, the policymakers. It's been for me, a wonderful example of integration. And as an IT professional, a reminder that at best we are instrument makers, luthiers, but the scientists are the players, and all the users get is the music in the end. We make tools. So I hope I was able to make the best tool for this particular music.
Thank you for that beautifully sort of poetic response. That was a lovely response. So, God, you see, if you were sitting next to me at dinner party, then I'd have to ask, oh, how did you make that leap from classical studies to IT? But there we go. You'll have to send me an email about that. Fascinating. Ilaria, what would you like to say?
I would like to reinforce a point made by Nube about the two ways benefits of the co-production process. As she said before, it's not just one-way learning. Also, both in co-production and also in the co-evaluation I've been working on, I've noticed the importance of this two-way learning, in the sense, for instance, talking about the evaluation, this has helped, it seems, that allows the end user to better understand when the product and the climate service is delivering value, how to optimally using it. And whereas on our side, this gives us, on the scientific and research side, this gives us feedback on how to improve it. Is it not delivering value? Then what can we do now to make it better, or to optimize and maximize the impact that we can achieve? So it has been a wonderful process to work all together, and I want to thank you, all the MedGold team, for this.
Thank you very much. I feel the love, as we say, really, and that's always delightful as a moderator to have that degree of enthusiasm. You have not shied away from the challenges. We're not saying that it was all rosy, and I don't doubt, as somebody said, believe me, it's tremendously complex. I think that was also something Federico said, but absolutely, we can see that. But it seems like there was a fantastic spirit in this, and just an assemblage of considerable brains with expertise in all sorts of different areas. Now, it is amazing that we are going to go into a break on time, actually. I want to remind the audience that you can ask questions on Swapcard, and the speakers will be able to see that. So don't worry, you can access presentations, and that's the absolute beauty of this particular platform. You must be hungry. That's something. You must be hungry. So a warm thank you to these fabulous speakers in this session and in the first session. You can all take a breather backstage now. I would suggest everybody does, of course, have a huge bowl of pasta drenched in olive oil with 7 glasses of wine, but then you will not be equipped for the sessions that start in 1 hour, those parallel sessions, and you have 1 hour at 2:15 to ask more questions that you let me go back. Sorry, I'm doing a rubbish job as a moderator because I myself am hungry. So during the next 60 minutes, as I said, you can ask questions on the platform. Don't forget, you can access videos and slides and other materials. You can connect with the MedGold partners. Please visit the replicability corner and do network with colleagues and peers. Just before 2:15, don't wait until the last minute, please make your way to one of the parallel sessions of your choice. And so you can discover how to really apply those MedGold tools in your sector by literally asking anything. We've got grape and wine in room 1, in room 2, olive and olive oil, in room 3, durum wheat, and in room 4, coffee and other agri-food sectors. Okay, I will be back here tomorrow for the first of 3 plenary sessions, and that is adopting and using innovation tools in organizations. You really don't want to miss listening to the fabulous speakers we have. And then we have 2 dynamic, nice short, sharp plenary sessions that will talk climate for policy making. We've heard it a lot that's come up today, so let's dive down into the details. And the third and final plenary session on that legacy of MedGold, the European landscape and beyond. And again, we had a whiff of that when we were talking, I think it was Luigi, on the real importance of how this fits into the global context. But back to now, thanks to all the fabulous speakers. Thank you to the technical team. I think you've had some bits and pieces to deal with, but you have done masterfully. It really is really tricky to put all this together, I can tell you, to our lovely audience. Enjoy a now's break, browse the platform, have a fruitful afternoon. See you tomorrow at 10 sharp. And I'm talking Brussels time here. Thank you so very much.